Okay, so for on the instructions, I've listed them as suitcase 1 through 5, and it goes suitcase 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. So let's go over here while her dress is still drying, and we'll work on this number 5 suitcase. Okay, so for suitcase number 5, I've used black soot. So I'm going to use my medium brush. I'm going to grab a little bit on the end of my brush, and remember, black soot is really dark, so you aren't going to need a ton. We're going to add some on, and I'm going to add it right where I want it to be the darkest. So I want it to be darkest right along this line of suitcases. I need a little bit more ink to be a little bit darker than that to start. So just like that, and then I'm going to wipe all this excess ink off. And then I'm just going to take my brush and pick it up and spread it away from the edge. Just like this. So you got this nice dark edge on this side right here, but as you go over here to the edge, it turns this nice light gray. And while I just have a little bitty bit on my brush, I'm going to get this handle up here so it can be a light gray too. Okay, and then we're going to let that one dry a little bit more, and I'll probably go back and add some more. While that's drying, let's go up and add a little bit of color to the one under her dress, which is suitcase 1. And for suitcase 1, I started with Vintage Photo. So I grab a little bit of Vintage Photo, and I'm going to make this side of the suitcases the darkest. So I'm going to start with my color on this side and lay down my line. Okay, and then I'm going to wipe the excess ink off, and I'm just going to lightly brush it across to her leg. Maybe get up here in a few of these little spaces up here underneath of her dress. Remember, we can go back after it's dry and add some more. This is just to get us started. Okay, and then I'm going to grab a little bit more. And this time I'm going to start over here on this side and add some paint so I can drag it the other way. Wipe my brush off. And then use just the ink I laid down to drag across the suitcase. I got a little bit on this tag here, so I'm going to wipe that off a little bit. Okay, and that's pretty good for our first coat. So while that is drying, let's go down here and work on this black one again. So I'm going to grab a little bit more of my black soot. And I'm just going to darken it up just a little bit more. Even it out just a bit. And I squeeze my brush so it's really wet now. Not always a good thing, but we're going to make it work. Okay, I'm liking that. Now it's kind of shining more on this side where the sun would be hitting it maybe a little bit. Okay, so let's go back up here to our vintage photo one. We're going to grab a little bit more vintage photo. And again, I'm going to start over here on this side. My brush is really wet, so I'm going to wipe it off. And I'm just going to use this to rub across to this side. And I didn't quite touch her leg. I let the water just kind of stop just a little bit before it got there. That way it didn't run into her skin tone. So let's grab a little bit more. And let's do this side over here. And I didn't wipe it off this time because there's not very much on there. And I need my color to go a little bit further this way because it's pretty light right over here. I may have to add a little bit from this way and go that way a little bit. But we're going to let it dry a little bit more here. Okay, we'll let that dry, and then we're going to go in and add a little bit of walnut stain on it to make it a little bit darker. And I want it to dry a little bit more so I can go in and put some more stain underneath of her dress here because it's going to be dark underneath there too. Okay, so I let that dry and I went ahead and mixed my colors. So I've mixed Vintage Photo first, and then I added a little dot of walnut stain to my mix. And I'm going to use that to add a little bit more shadow. So I'm going to grab a little bit of my mixed paint. And I'm actually going to add that right here underneath of her dress too. Her dress would cast a shadow on the little suitcase. Just like that. Okay, and I'm going to darken up this edge of my suitcase just a little bit. Maybe make this edge over here just a little bit darker too, so it looks like it kind of wraps around. Just like that. Kind of blend it out. Okay, and I'm going to let that dry, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to add another coat. Maybe add a little bit more walnut stain to my ink. Alright, now that that's dried, I went ahead and added a little bit more of my walnut stain to my mixed paint. I'm going to make it just a little bit darker still. And I'm going to again start over here on this edge. Just going to make this side a little bit darker. Like that, and maybe give this edge over here just a little bit. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that suitcase, so let's go down and work on this bottom one, which is suitcase number 4. Alright, so for suitcase number 4, I started out with barn door. I'm going to grab just a tiny bit of that. And again, I want it to be darkest on this side over here. So I'm going to lay my ink down there first. And I'm just going to go this way with it. stretch it as far over here as we can to the other side. A little bit more in here between the latches and the handle. Okay, so let's go up and color suitcase 3, which is Scattered Straw, and I probably should have colored that before I colored this red one, but I'm going to be really careful so I don't get any red in my yellow up here. So we're going to start with Scattered Straw, and again I want it to be darkest on this side of the suitcase, so I'm just going to lay down my color over here first, and then use that color to wipe it to the other side. And then I made these little stripes black, but I made the middle one the Scattered Straw too, so I'm going to go ahead and get that. Let's do this side of the suitcase. Pulling it all the way across to this other side. And if you get some in there on the stripes, that's okay, or here I painted this latch on accident, that's okay too, because I'm going to paint it black, so it'll be fine. Okay, so while I did this side over here is dried, so I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to darken it up just a little bit more. Didn't have quite enough ink on my brush the first time. There, that looks pretty good. Okay, so while that's drying, I'm going to go up and we're going to, let's paint the latch on this suitcase up here since it's not touching anything. So for that, I'm going to use black soot. Okay, so right up here, see this suitcase is already dry, so I'm going to go ahead and paint that one with some black soot on a little handle. Black soot, remember, the inks are really dark, so I'm going to just grab a little bit and then I wipe my brush off, and then I wipe that around a little bit. And then it looks like I painted these little latches a darker color like the suitcase, so I'm going to grab a little bit of Vintage Photo. I'm going to get just this side and be careful not to get on her leg. Just like that. And then let's go up here and do this book too. The book I've done with pumice stone. So I'm going to grab a little bit of that. And I'll start right here in the center of the book. Bring it right down like that, and then wipe my brush off, and then just very lightly bring it out here to the side. So it just colors it just a little bit. Like that. Okay, and then our yellow suitcase has dried, so let's go ahead and add some shadows to that. So for that, I'm going to use Scattered Straw, and I'm going to mix it with Walnut Stain. So I put my Scattered Straw down first on my nonstick craft mat, and then I added just a little dot of Walnut Stain and mixed it up. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a little bit of that. And again, I want my suitcase to be darkest on this side, so I'm going to darken it up over here. And it might be a little bit darker like where the lid closes, so I'm going to put a little bit under there. smooth it out. And the bottom is going to be a little bit shadowed, so I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit more down there. And this suitcase is sitting on top of it, so I'm going to put a little bit underneath of that, just a little bit. Okay, I'm going to let that dry, and then if I decide I want to have a little bit more, I'll go back and put some more on there. So while that's drying, let's go and do, well, it looks like the suitcase in the middle is what we have left. So let's let that dry just a second, and then we will paint the middle suitcase. Alright, so our yellow suitcase is dry, and I'm liking how dark that is, so I'm going to leave it like that, and I'm going to go up here and I'm going to start painting suitcase number 2, which I have used weathered wood. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a little bit of that. I'm just going to lay a little bit down here on the side. I'm going to wipe my brush off, and I'm just going to run it and use that ink I laid down to color in a little bit. And I can see already I'm going to need to grab a little bit more. Grab just a little dab. Being real careful not to get it on her leg. Maybe darken up this side right here just a little bit more. And then it can dry and we'll add a little bit more on top of that. Okay, that's pretty good for our first coat. So I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to go down here and we're going to work a little bit more on our red suitcase. And remember, we're coloring our red suitcase barn door first. So I'm going to grab a little bit more of my barn door. And I think I'll darken up this side of the suitcase over here a little bit more. It's not very dark. So I'm going to put my barn door on there. And I'm going to be careful not to get it on my yellow suitcase, which I should have done this red one the very last. I always have a problem with red. I usually end up getting it on other things. So I'm going to try to be careful. Like right here, I got it down here on the ground. But that's alright, we're just going to leave that. And again, these latches are going to be black, so if you get a little bit on there, that's okay. The black will cover it up. Okay, so we'll let that dry, and while that's drying, I'm going to go up here and we're going to add a little bit more color to our weathered wood suitcase, number 2. And so for that, I have mixed weathered wood and a little tiny dab of black soot to add some shadows. So I'm going to grab a little bit of my mixed paint, and again, I want it to be darkest on this side, so I'm going to start over here. I'm going to darken up underneath where this suitcase is going to be sitting on top of the other suitcase too. Just make the top just a little bit darker. And again, be careful not to touch her leg. Bring a little bit more over here. Maybe darkened up where the lid shuts. And I think I'll put a little bit more down here at the bottom. Darken up just the bottom of the suitcase just a tad more. Okay, I think that looks pretty good, so I'm going to let that dry. And so while that's drying, I'm going to go back down here to our red suitcase. And for a red suitcase to add shadows, I have used the barn door and then a little bit of black soot mixed in. So I have that already mixed up, so I'm going to grab just a little bit of that on my brush. And I'm going to add a little bit of shadow, so I want to add a little bit underneath this yellow suitcase. So I'm just going to go right along the edge very carefully. Try not to touch the yellow suitcase. And then I want it to be darker on this side of the suitcase, so I'm going to put some over here. Like that. Maybe a little bit more on the bottom. And I'm liking how when you darken up underneath the lid, so I'm going to go ahead and put some under there. Darken up the bottom down here a bit more. But you just got to kind of fiddle with it until you get it the way you like. And since I've colored this image now 3 times because I messed it up in the middle of the video, I should be an expert at coloring it by now. Okay, so we're going to let that dry. So while that's drying, let's go up and color the black stripes on the yellow suitcase. A little bit of black soot. And I'm just going to put that right here. Oops, dab my brush off, it's a little wet. I'm just going to use that to paint down to the bottom. Be careful not to cover up her shoe. Okay, remember, you got to let that dry, so we'll let that dry a second. And while that's drying, let's go up and color the handle on the second suitcase too. That way it can be drying and then we can paint the bow. And this suitcase has a couple of little finials right here on the side of the suitcase, so I'm going to paint those. They're pretty small, so be careful. What also would work really good too on those is these small areas is the markers, the distress markers. Those would work really good. Alright, so while that's drying, let's go down and put a little bit on the handles of the red suitcase. Color those a little bit. It's got a little crazy there and went out of the lines. Try to dab that up just a bit. Okay, let's add a little bit more to our yellow suitcase. Get these little handles on the side too, the little latches. Whoops. Yeah, those distress markers would probably work perfect on these little handles because those are pretty small. But if you don't have those, just be careful. Just like that. Okay, we'll give that a second to dry. Okay, so while that's drying, let's go and there's some tags on all of these suitcases. And for all the tags, I put a little bit of pumice stone on there. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab a little bit of my pumice stone and color up my tag. And I just kind of let the ink run out on each tag. So the first tag is a little bit dark, and then the next tag that comes along has less and less ink depending on how much I've used on my brush. And then she's wearing a bracelet. So for her bracelet, I colored that scattered straw. So let's grab some of that. And just give it a little dab. It's a little bit of color in there. And that leaves us with this bow on package suitcase number 2. So for that, I colored it the same color as her dress, and I used the mixed paint. So I've got tumbled glass and pine needles mixed together. So I'm going to grab a little bit of that and just paint my bow. I'm going to let that dry a second. And come back and add a little bit more if you want to darken it up. Alright, I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so there is our July watercoloring card kit of the month, and it's a lot of painting, so be patient. Just do each section at a time. You know, if you have to walk away in between, just do that. I've also got on the card, she's wearing these glasses, and on the glasses I put some glossy accents up here in the lenses. I didn't actually color her glasses any color because they're so small the brush will not color in there. You can maybe use your markers or a gel pen or a sparkle pen. That would look really pretty. And then on all these tags have words on them. I used my Spica glitter pen to go back and color over those so they're glittery. So thanks for joining me this time, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day.